Zero-calorie foods, myth or reality? Have you ever wondered how a package labeled 0 calories can give you a sudden sense of confidence, as if you have just made a brilliant move in the game called The Struggle with Weight, even though you simply opened a can of soda? Imagine this. You are walking down a store aisle, tired, hungry, and irritated by endless diets and promises of miracle cures, and then, bam, a bottle appears before you with 0 calories and full taste, written in black and white. And you reach for it like you are under a spell, because really, how can something delicious be absolutely free for your waistline? It is as if you were given a magical map that lets you enjoy the sweetness of life with impunity, without paying for it with a single gram of fat. At that moment, you almost believe in a fairy tale. Here it is, the coveted formula for success, the philosopher's stone of dietetics, a product that gives everything but demands nothing in return. But what if I told you that this fairy tale is not entirely true, or rather, it is written in water-soluble paint, and under the rain of reality, the 0 calories label begins to fade, leaving only the vague outlines of a deception on the package? What if behind this enticing phrase lies not magic, but a sophisticated game with the laws of physics, the chemistry of the human body, and our own perception? Today, we are not just going to talk about diet products or marketing tricks. We are going to embark on a real investigation, during which we will debunk myths, reveal laboratory secrets, understand how metabolism actually works, and most importantly, find out why our brain so passionately wants to believe in something that might not exist in nature. We will look into history, where the first free products appeared long before the term calorie was coined, trace how science and industry formed an alliance beneficial to everyone, except perhaps ourselves, and analyze why even what formally contains 0 calories can cost your body much more than you think. You will learn how in the 21st century you can accidentally eat nothing and still gain weight, why sweeteners created to save us from diabetes can become its unexpected ally, and how even simple water with lemon has turned into an artifact of the modern food cult. This story is not just about food, it is a story about trust. It is about who we believe when we choose what to put in our mouths, and how easy it is to turn the hope for an easy solution into a chronic misunderstanding of our own bodies. And perhaps, after you finish listening to this article, you will never look at a 0 calories label the same way again. Let us start with the very foundation, with a definition that would seem to be simple, but in reality turned out to be one of the most confusing in modern food science. What is a calorie anyway, and why did it become the main currency of our relationship with food? A calorie is a unit of measurement for the energy needed to heat 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius, and it ended up on food labels not because scientists considered it an ideal tool for assessing nutritional value, but because at the end of the 19th century, an American chemist named Wilbur Olin Atwater invented the so-called bomb calorimeter chamber, a device that allowed burning food and measuring the heat released in the process, and proposed using the data obtained to calculate the nutritional value of foods as the sum of calories from proteins, fats, and carbohydrates. Moreover, he proposed a simplified system: 4 calories per gram of protein, 4 per gram of carbohydrates, and 9 per gram of fat, figures that are still used almost everywhere on the planet, despite the fact that modern research shows the body does not always extract as much energy from food as the calorimeter indicates. For example, almonds burned in a laboratory yield about 650 calories per 100 grams, but in reality, a person absorbs 20% less because the cell walls of nuts are partially resistant to digestion, and a significant portion of the calories simply passes through in transit. That is to say, from the very beginning, the system has been based on an assumption that does not always work in real life, as if the human body were an ideal furnace burning everything loaded into it with maximum efficiency. Now add to this a marketing trick that allows manufacturers to declare a product zero-calorie if one serving contains fewer than 5 calories. So formally, if you eat 20 servings, you already get 100 calories, an entire banana, but the packaging will still say zero. This is not deception in a legal sense, but it is a manipulation of perception, and it works so well that millions of people believe if the label says zero, it means you can eat as much as you want. Meanwhile, even pure water, strictly speaking, contains calories, not nutritional, but thermal ones. To heat a glass of room temperature water to body temperature, the body requires energy, and if you drink ice water, the energy expenditure is even higher. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism showed that consuming 500 milliliters of ice water can increase the body's energy expenditure by 30 calories within 10 minutes, an effect called water-induced thermogenesis. So if we are to be completely consistent, then true zero-calorie content is possible only in a vacuum, and even there, if you decide to eat it, you will likely need energy to open the packaging. Let us move now to the main characters of this story, the sweeteners, those invisible ingredients that make the existence of sweet without consequences possible. They can be divided into two large groups, caloric and non-caloric. The first group includes, for example, sorbitol, xylitol, and mannitol, which are sugar alcohols that contain about 2.5 calories per gram, but are absorbed slowly and partially, so they are often called low-calorie. The second group, artificial sweeteners such as aspartame, sucralose, saccharin, and plant-derived steviosides, includes substances that theoretically provide no energy because they do not break down in the gastrointestinal tract or are excreted unchanged. Aspartame, one of the most common, consists of two amino acids, phenylalanine and aspartic acid, and breaks down into them in the intestines. But since their amount in one serving is minimal, and the body already receives these amino acids from regular protein, the energy contribution is considered negligible. However, a first paradox arises here. If a substance is not absorbed, how can it affect the body at all? The answer lies not in the intestines, but in the brain. In humans, as in most mammals, there are sweet taste receptors on the tongue, T1R2 and T1R3, which upon receiving a signal that sugar has entered, send a message to the brain. Get ready, energy is coming soon. In response, the hypothalamus activates a chain of reactions. The secretion of the hormone ghrelin, which causes hunger, decreases. The pancreas begins preparing to release insulin, and intestinal motility slows down. All of this to absorb the incoming glucose as efficiently as possible. But if nothing follows the sweet taste, neither glucose nor fructose, the brain ends up deceived. And then something unexpected happens. Sometime after taking an artificial sweetener, the level of ghrelin does not just return to the baseline, but rises above it, and insulin sensitivity may temporarily decrease. In the 25th issue of the journal Nature for 2014, a paper by Israeli scientists was published showing that mice drinking water with saccharin developed glucose intolerance, a condition preceding type 2 diabetes, and that this effect was not related to the direct action of the sweetener, but to changes in the gut microbiome. In the experimental animals, the proportion of bacteria capable of causing inflammation and disrupting carbohydrate metabolism increased sharply. When the researchers transplanted the fecal microflora from these mice into healthy individuals, they also began to suffer from impaired glucose tolerance. Then, in a follow-up experiment, the scientists tested this effect on 7 human volunteers. For a week, they consumed the maximum allowable dose of saccharin, and 4 of the 7 recorded significant changes in the composition of their intestinal microflora and a worsening of metabolic indicators. This discovery overturned the idea that if it is not caloric, it means it is safe, and showed that even substances that do not provide energy directly can trigger a cascade of biochemical events, leading to weight gain indirectly. But that is not all, because behind 0 calories, there is often not just chemistry, but also behavioral psychology. Imagine a person who has strictly followed a diet all day, oatmeal without sugar, salad without oil, steamed chicken breast, and then for dinner they allow themselves a burger, justifying it by the fact that they took a Diet Cola with it and not a regular one. Scientists call this the compensation effect, or a license to sin, when the consumption of a low-calorie product creates the illusion of saved calories that can be spent later on something more caloric. In 2006, researchers from the University of Texas conducted a curious experiment. Two groups of participants were offered the same dessert, ice cream, but one group was served it in packaging labeled New Low-Calorie Formula, while the other was given it simply as regular ice cream. Subsequently, it turned out that the participants from the first group ate an average of 30% more ice cream than those from the second, and at the same time felt less guilty. And in a study published in Appetite in 2015, volunteers were given a lunch including a sandwich and a drink, one group with regular cola and the other with Diet Cola. Although the total calorie content of the lunch was the same, those who drank Diet Cola consumed 150 more calories over the next 4 hours than the control group. Why? Because the brain, not having received the expected reinforcement in the form of glucose after the sweet taste, continued to send hunger signals, and the person, without realizing it, simply took more cookies, unaware that their body was still looking for the promised energy. Particularly alarming is the fact that this effect manifests even in children. In a study conducted in Canada, children aged 7 to 12 who regularly consumed drinks with artificial sweeteners gained an average of 2 kilograms more over 11 months than their peers who drank plain water, even if their initial weight and physical activity levels were comparable. And the point is not that sweeteners directly cause appetite, they disrupt the consistency between taste and consequences, and when this connection is broken, the body loses the ability to accurately regulate energy balance. We are used to thinking that weight is simple arithmetic, calories in minus calories out, but in reality, it is an orchestra of hundreds of hormones, neurotransmitters, bacteria, and genetic regulators, and when a false note interferes, even the quietest one, the whole melody can fall out of rhythm. Now, let us look deeper into history, because the idea of free food was not born yesterday in a marketer's office, but goes back to the distant past, when people first began to dream of food that requires no labor. In ancient Egypt, merchants told a legend about a tree growing at the edge of the desert, whose fruits satisfied hunger for the whole day, but at the same time weighed no more than a feather and left no heaviness in the stomach. In India, yogis have practiced upavasana for thousands of years, fasting with the use of only water and lemon juice, believing that in this way they can cleanse the body of the excessive weight of karma. And in medieval Europe, alchemists sought not only the philosopher's stone, but also an elixir of lightness that would allow one to eat without limits and not get fat, because obesity was then considered a sign of laziness and moral decay. But the real breakthrough happened in 1879, when a scientist named Konstantin Fallberg, working in a laboratory at Johns Hopkins, discovered one evening after returning home from work that the bread he was eating for dinner had an unusually sweet taste. He remembered that during the day he had been working on the oxidation of toluene and had probably forgotten to wash his hands, and then, returning to the laboratory, he isolated a substance that was named saccharin. The world's first artificial sweetener was discovered by accident, like penicillin and the microwave. And at first, it was not even considered a food product. It was used to sweeten medicines. But during World War I, when sugar became scarce, saccharin instantly turned into a strategic resource. In Germany, it was called patriotic sweet, and in the United States, President Theodore Roosevelt, who suffered from obesity, personally defended its use, stating at a meeting of the Committee on Food Additives that anyone who says saccharin is harmful is lying. In the 30s, cyclamate appeared, which was even sweeter than saccharin, and in '56, aspartame was created during the development of a drug for ulcers. Each new sweetener promised to be safer, cleaner, and more natural than its predecessor, and every time a new wave of scandals erupted, as in '69, when bladder cancer was found in rats receiving a mixture of saccharin and cyclamate. The industry quickly replaced one component with another, maintaining the overall message that you can eat sweets and stay slim. By the end of the '90s, sucralose entered the market, a modified sugar molecule in which 3 hydroxyl groups are replaced by chlorine atoms, and it was declared so safe that it is not even recognized by the body as food. And indeed, about 85% of sucralose is excreted in the feces unchanged, and the rest in the urine. But in 2009, an article appeared in the journal Toxicology and Applied Pharmacology stating that even the unabsorbed part of sucralose can affect the composition of the intestinal microflora. In rats receiving it for 12 weeks, the number of beneficial bifidobacteria and lactobacilli decreased by 50%, and the pH level in the large intestine increased, which creates a favorable environment for pathogenic microorganisms. And although manufacturers argued that the doses in rats were much higher than a human gets from drinks, the question remained: if a substance does not interact with the body, why does it still change its internal ecosystem? The answer probably lies in the fact that even invisible molecules can serve as signals for microbes, like a flag on a battlefield that says prey will be here soon. And if there is no prey, the microbes start looking for it themselves, for example by breaking down the mucous membrane of the intestine or causing inflammation to provoke an influx of nutrients. And yet, you might ask, do there not exist real products with 0 calories? What about celery, cucumbers, lemons, green tea? Yes, there are products whose net energy value is close to 0, meaning the energy spent on chewing, digesting, and absorbing them is comparable to or even exceeds the energy contained in them. For example, a stalk of celery weighing 100 grams contains about 16 calories, but the body spends about 5 calories on its digestion and another 3 or 4 on chewing, so the net gain is only 7 or 8 calories. But even this does not make it 0. It is just that the efficiency of its absorption is low. Now, green tea is a completely different story. In it, there are indeed almost no carbohydrates, proteins, or fats, but it contains catechins, especially epigallocatechin gallate, which activate enzymes involved in the breakdown of fats and increase heat production. In a meta-analysis including 14 studies and more than 1,000 participants, taking green tea extract led to an average weight loss of 1.5 kilograms over 12 weeks. Not a fantastic result, but proof that 0-calorie drinks can give off energy rather than just not taking it. However, a trap arises here again. If you add lemon to this tea, you add about 2 calories per slice, a trifle, but if you decide to drink such a beverage 30 times a day, that is already 60 calories. And more importantly, citric acid improves the absorption of catechins, but also increases the acidity of gastric juice, which in some people can lead to heartburn and consequently to a search for a neutralizer, such as a piece of toast with butter. That is to say, even the cleanest, low-calorie product is built into a behavioral chain, and it is behavior rather than calories that often turns out to be the decisive factor. In Japan, where green tea is drunk by the liter, the obesity rate remains one of the lowest in developed countries, but not because tea burns fat, but because it is embedded in a culture of moderation, conscious consumption, and respect for food as a ritual rather than a background action. There, they do not drink tea instead of, but drink it in addition to a balanced diet, without expecting a miracle from it, but accepting it as part of a lifestyle. But let us return to the main question. Why do we so passionately want to believe in 0 calories? The answer, perhaps, lies not in science, but in our collective anxiety. We live in an era of abundance. Never before has humanity had such access to cheap, tasty, high-calorie food. On average, worldwide, a person today eats 250 more calories per day than in 1975, and at the same time moves 40% less. We are surrounded by temptations, advertising that tells us to eat, and medicine that tells us not to eat. Social networks where every second post is a cheesecake recipe, and trainers posting photos of their abs with the hashtag no excuses. In such a situation, 0 calories becomes a psychic painkiller, a pill that allows one to combine the incompatible, pleasure and control. It is a kind of moratorium on guilt, an opportunity to say to oneself, I am not breaking down, I am just choosing a smart alternative. And manufacturers understand this perfectly. Therefore, phrases like pure energy, natural sweetness, lightness in every drop appear on labels, phrases that appeal not to reason but to emotions. Especially telling is the fate of stevia, a plant traditionally used in Paraguay and Brazil to sweeten tea, which in 2008 was approved by the FDA as a food additive, but with a caveat, only in the form of purified steviosides and not in the form of leaves. Why? Because the extract can be standardized, patented, and controlled, while the leaves remain in the natural zone, where marketing loses its power. And then companies began to produce stevia with natural flavor, adding erythritol, a caloric sugar alcohol, to mask the bitter aftertaste and calling it real stevia, although by chemical composition it is already a hybrid. Thus, natural becomes the new artificial, and 0 calorie becomes a new form of self-deception. However, it would be unfair to claim that all 0 calorie products are harmful. For some people, they become a real salvation. Imagine a person with type 1 diabetes who from childhood has been forced to count every gram of carbohydrates. For them, Diet Cola is not a way to cheat a diet, but an opportunity to participate in normal life, to drink the same thing as friends without giving an insulin injection. Or a person who has undergone gastric bypass surgery, in whom even a teaspoon of sugar can cause dumping syndrome, rapid heartbeat, sweating, and dizziness. And for them, sweeteners are the only way to return even a hint of sweetness to the diet. Or a patient with a neurodegenerative disease, in whom the satiety mechanism is disrupted, and who, without sweeteners, simply will not be able to maintain weight. In such cases, 0 calorie products are not a myth, but a real medical tool. The problem arises when they are used en masse, without considering individual characteristics, as a universal solution for everyone. Because metabolism is not a machine, but an ecosystem, and what saves one person can harm another. Genetic studies have shown that 3% of the population has a mutation in the TAS1R2 gene, responsible for the sweet taste receptor. And for these people, even high concentrations of sweeteners do not cause any response, because their receptors simply do not see the signal. And 28% of people have a variation of the TCF7L2 gene associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes. And for them, the consumption of artificial sweeteners leads to a sharper decrease in insulin sensitivity than for others. That is to say, the same drink can be neutral for one person, beneficial for a second, and potentially dangerous for a third, and no label saying 0 calories will reflect this. So where is the truth? The truth is that content, there are only degrees of energy efficiency. Even breathing requires energy. To inhale, the diaphragm needs to contract, and about 0.3 calories are spent on one breath in and out. In 24 hours, with 12 breaths per minute, that is already 520 calories, almost a third of the daily allowance for a middle-aged woman. So, to be honest, every breath is a microscopic deficit, and every breath out is a microscopic act of payment. And then the question stops being, can one eat without calories, and turns into, what calories are worth getting? Because calories are not enemies, calories are opportunities. Every calorie is a joule of energy that can become a step up the stairs, a line in a letter, a child's hug, an idea born in the silence of the morning. The problem is not with calories as such, but in how we choose them, not consciously, but by inertia, under the pressure of habit, advertising, and fatigue. And therefore, the key is not in the search for a free lunch, but in rethinking the cost. What are you willing to pay for taste, for convenience, for the illusion of control? Perhaps real freedom is not in finding a product with 0 calories, but in stopping viewing food as a debt and starting to perceive it as a dialogue with the body, with culture, with nature. And here, I want to ask you, dear listeners, one last question. What if instead of looking for 0 products, we start looking for complete ones? Not those that give nothing, but those that give everything. Vitamins, fiber, antioxidants, pleasure, a sense of gratitude. What if instead of being afraid of calories, we learn to value them like precious coins that can be spent wisely? Because the body is not an enemy to be bargained with, but a home that demands respect. And in this home, there is no place for illusions or extremes, only balance, observation, and curiosity. So let us set the labels aside, at least for one day, and just try. Let us try an apple without a thought about calories. Let us try tea without additives. Let us try to feel how food passes through us, how it warms, nourishes, and inspires. After all, knowledge is not only information we receive from outside, but also wisdom we grow inside. And every time you choose consciously, not because it is written on the package, but because your body says so, you take a step towards something much more important than 0-calorie content. You take a step towards freedom. And now, go ahead, open the kitchen cupboard, look at the contents, and ask yourself an honest question. What of this is real? What of this is the truth? And let your next bite not be an act of compensation, not an attempt to cheat the system, but a small but sincere gesture of trust in yourself. Because you are worthy of this, not a 0, but the whole.